again, this is Dave Litton and a warm welcome to Module 2. Now in this module, as you can see, we'll be covering the Agile principles and laying down the bedrock for the next module, which will be looking at the Agile life cycle. Now these 8 principles underline, if you will, the whole project management philosophy. You'll recall we covered that in Module 1. And it has to be said that if any compromise is made on a single principle, then that will in turn compromise the basic Agile philosophy. So it's absolutely important that the whole team buy in, if you will, to the Agile principles mindset. And as a way of, if you will, getting you to buy into that right now, what I'd like to start off with is a quick review of the strengths that applying Agile to your projects will bring you. And you'll see how those dovetail nicely into the 8 principles. Now, by the use of the iterative approach that an Agile project uses, then the users are more likely to claim solution ownership, because during the development of the products, user representatives will be constantly present within the development team themselves. The solution is more likely to meet the user's business requirements by a similar way, if you will, because of course the business representatives take on roles both at the project level and within the development team level. So if you like, these 2 points here are common in that user and business representatives are present on the whole project journey, if you will, from the very outset. And of course, by having user representatives within the team, then aspects such as training the end users will have considered training aspects from the very outset and ensuring that the training is appropriate for each user. There's a reduced risk of building the wrong solution because of its incremental and iterative development. There's not a big bang approach, if you will, to delivering the end product, maximizing the chance of giving the customer exactly what they wanted. You'll recall I talked about the iron triangle and in fact said it was a pyramid. You'll remember that the Agile approach is in fact to fix time and costs and to agree quality up front and vary features by using prioritization. Well, lower priority features are either dropped or deferred, and you'll learn in a later module how we use the Moscow technique: must have, could have, should have, or won't have for now. And this is used throughout the development of the products. Now, time therefore and cost and quality are fixed. Using time boxes, as we'll learn again in a later module, we can see how each step of the way with constant reviews, the iterative approach to development fixes an end date of each time box at the lowest level. And if you can fix the completion time for each time box as you go up to increments, phases, stages and the project itself, we can see that the end dates of projects can be kept by, as I said over here, prioritizing the whole list of features. And time, cost and quality are fixed in the foundations phase, which we'll learn about in the next module. Like any good method, Agile should be tailored to suit each project. Therefore, no matter what type of project you have and in what industry, you will be able to take the Agile approach and modify it, if you will, to suit the project nature and environment. Agile is flexible enough to incorporate and accommodate other disciplines and approaches, and I've used Prince 2 as one of many examples I could have used. For examples, XP for extreme programming, Lean, Scrum and so on and so forth. Agile has the flexibility to enable other valuable disciplines and approaches to be used. Ensuring that the stakeholders are involved in product development will ensure there's no surprises, so that when the product is ready to be deployed into its operational area, this will go smoothly. Take this point, if you will, in harmony with this one, where user representatives ensure that the users are better trained, so that when a product goes live, those who will be using it know exactly how that is to be done. And finally, well-defined high-level requirements will stop the so-called scope creep. Do you recall? Even though we haven't got all the details yet, we expect the understanding of the details to emerge as the project progresses, but the high-level requirements ensure that the scope of the project is solid from the very beginning. And we also mentioned up here about quality being fixed at the outset. How does that happen? Well, agreed acceptance criteria happens at the start of the project and ensures therefore that appropriate quality levels are fixed and such metrics, where appropriate, appear in each product. So there we have it, a quick overview of the strengths of DSDM, and this plays nicely into the next slides where we're going to look at the 8 principles of Agile, and you'll see many common references to these aspects which we covered in Module 1. Let's make a start. Just to remind you that the 8 principles direct the team's attitude and mindset for consistent delivery. Miss any of the principles out or not embed them appropriately, then you're putting the project at risk. Little team buy-in or non-adherence to any principle creates risk for the project. So for example, if poor communication occurred throughout the project, then this would put the project success at a high risk. Let's look at the first principle. Number 1, focus on the business need. It's absolutely vital that everyone in the team, indeed all stakeholders, understand what the true business priorities actually are, and that during the project a sound business case which demonstrates that the project is and remains a viable undertaking. Throughout the project, continuous business sponsorship and commitment within the team is absolutely vital. And something called the minimum usable subset, sorry about that typo. We will discuss this, it's part of the Moscow prioritization approach. Number 2, deliver on time. What this means is that the product development work will be carried out within a time box. More of that later. Again, the focus must be on the business priorities so that time is of the essence and that deadlines never slip. And as it says, always hit deadlines within the time box, within each increment, within each stage and phase, and of course for the project itself. Principle number 3, collaborate. It's a well-known fact that teams that work closely together will always be more successful than those that don't. What collaboration is there to do is to increase the common understanding of what needs to be done, ensure that the work is carried out in the most efficient and effective way, and of course shared ownership between all involved within the teams. How do we go about doing that? Involving the right stakeholders at the right time to make sure again that communication is maximized. Members of the team must be empowered to make decisions. In Module 1 I discussed the fact that the project manager has more of a facilitative role and is there to ensure that the team is within an environment that allows them to thrive and to be successful. And it's therefore the team themselves that create the plans. Therefore they must be empowered to make the right decisions at the right time. As I've said in the previous slide, collaboration means that we actively involve the business representatives within the Agile project organization. And the focus here is to build a one-team culture. The SDM return principle number 4, never compromise quality. You will recall that the level of quality is agreed at the outset and that there should be no gold plating. Remember, the solution has to be just good enough, no more and no less. Ensure that quality does not become a variable. It's not negotiable. Quality, of course, is built in by constant reviews within the time box to ensure that the emerging products have the right quality criteria. And throughout the project, everything is tested as early as possible. Often, how to test a product is agreed before the build of the product is even started. So design, document, and test appropriately throughout the project. And as I've said, test early and continuously. Principle number 5, build incrementally from firm foundations. The value of this, of course, is that you'll be continually confirming that the correct solution is being built. As each increment, if you will, is completed, by delivering incrementally, we can get feedback on how the build is going. This will also, of course, build confidence both within the team, but most importantly, within the customer and user environment. As a result of early delivery of prioritized business products, then we can gain early business benefit wherever possible. And this, if you recall, will help improve return on investment and strengthen the business case. By building incrementally, we can reassess priorities as the project proceeds through its various stages. And project viability, that's with the business case, of course, with each delivered increment. Principle number 6, develop iteratively. Now, by doing this, will allow the team to converge on an accurate business solution. And remember, that it's a fact of life that nothing is ever built perfectly first time. So developing products in an iterative fashion is the most efficient way to go. So do enough design up front to create strong foundations. This refers to the foundations phase, which we'll be covering in the next module. And accept that most detail emerges later rather than sooner. This refers not just, of course, to the customer's understanding of what their requirements actually are, but also the solution development team will learn more about what is required within each project as a result of iterative development. So take an iterative approach to product building. Build customer feedback into each iteration so we can learn as we go forward further into the project. Embrace change to allow the right solution to emerge. Again, entirely different approach to a traditional project. Thanks to iterative development, change will come naturally and easily, allowing us to converge upon the right solution. As we'll see when we look at some of the techniques and practices within Agile, be creative, experiment, learn and evolve. In this way, what is being developed will be exactly what the business really needs. Principle number 7, communicate continuously and clearly. Now, the nature of communication within an Agile project is often quite different to those in a traditional project, which uses documented information as a prime source of communication. What an Agile project uses is to run daily team stand-up sessions. We'll learn more about that when we look at the time boxes, but in essence it is what it sounds like. In other words, the team have a quick, maybe 10 or 15 minutes session each day to determine the status of product development, any problems and issues, and to agree future actions. Some of the techniques and practices here play a key role in helping to communicate continuously and clearly. For example, facilitated workshops is one that you'll learn about. Another is the clearly defined Agile organization roles, which include heavy user involvement. Modeling and prototyping is yet another technique which we'll learn about, allowing partially functional early development products to be used as a basis for scrutiny. So in order to communicate continuously and clearly, present instances of such evolving solutions early and often, as I've just mentioned. Keep documentation lean and timely. There is a lot of named documents, as I've said earlier, within the Agile Project Management Handbook, but these should be used intelligently. Certainly lean is a key word here. If some documents only need a few paragraphs, then that's all you put in. If some documents don't need to be used, then don't use them, and produce in a timely fashion so that they can be used effectively. Most importantly, manage stakeholder expectations throughout the project. This will be a lot easier than a traditional project because, as I've said many times now, representatives of the business and user community are built in from the outset within an Agile project's organization. Encourage informal face-to-face communication at all levels, rather than sit down and spend several days writing a document and publishing it on an intranet, for example. Use facilitated workshops throughout the project. In a later module, I'll show you just how many instances facilitated workshops can be applied and used within each phase. Use rich communication techniques, for example, modeling and prototyping, so that early prototypes can be showed and shared, allowing the team and other stakeholders to diagnose it, to scrutinize it, and make decisions for further development or otherwise. Principle number 8, demonstrate control. I'm going to cover an entire module on control much later, but for now, the ability to be in control means that the team must be able to monitor and to measure progress, so that this can be compared against the various plans that will have been created. Time box plans are an example here. At its very heart, control is referring to what you planned to do in the first place, looking what is actually happening, determining any variances, and on that basis decide whether you need to change the way in which you're working or change work that is forecast to happen in the near future. What's important here within Agile is to use an appropriate level of formality for tracking and reporting. You may well use similar tools, for example, as a traditional project, such as Microsoft Project. But that only helps you to gather data. Demonstrating control is taking appropriate action to remain in control, and doing it as informal as is appropriate is an important approach within an Agile project. Make plans and progress visible to all key stakeholders, all that need to see them. Measure the progress, this is an important point, through the focus on delivery of the products rather than completed activities. This particular aspect of this principle would be true on any project. Merely saying that of the 100 hours work you are 60% complete means little, because for all you or anyone else might know, the first 60% of work might be easy and straightforward, and the last 40% is the most difficult. And just because you're 60% through the work, let's just say measured in hours, doesn't necessarily mean you're 60% in terms of completion of the product. So what Agile says is, although you'll want to track work for cost, resource and time reasons, what you'll actually be focusing on is the delivery of the products. And a product that has been completed, tested and reviewed and authorized as complete is obviously 100% complete, and no one can argue with that fact. Manage proactively. What this means, of course, is that being proactive means taking action on aspects that have yet to happen, so that you can forward look, if you will, to use a very common expression, to stay ahead of the curve. Evaluate continuing project viability based on the business objectives. Do you remember, at a very simple level, a business case could be seen as a set of scales, benefits on one side and cost, time and risk on the other. And I talked about the time value of money. So it's important while developing the products that the business case is continually checked for its viability. Okay, moving on, I now want to cover a document called the Project Approach Questionnaire. Now, the purpose of this is to help the team in deciding whether or not they are well placed to answer each of 8 success factors, which I'll cover in a moment starting on this slide. And in essence, the Project Approach Questionnaire will help you identify and confirm that you're in good shape to meet the 8 success factors. And of course, if any of these are not true, then this would give rise to any risk areas that need to be urgently addressed before continuing any further. This questionnaire is normally completed during feasibility, as you can see, and reassessed during foundations. Now, it consists of 21 key areas, and I've just included the first and last here to give you a flavour of the type of content you would find within the Project Approach Questionnaire. Number 1 statement says the business driver behind the project is clearly stated and is visible to all members of the project team. And all the way from yes, putting a check mark here, strongly agree, to strongly disagree, will give you clues as to whether you're in good shape on this particular aspect. Any check marks, I would suggest, in these 3 boxes here should give you some cause to concern. And you can see how this particular questionnaire will allow you to assess potential risk areas. Certainly any checks here would highlight that. As it happens, statement number 21 says there are no mandatory standards, keyword is no, for practices in force that will work against the evolution of a solution from a baseline set of high-level requirements. If the answer is, well, in actual fact, there are some mandatory standards, because you're disagreeing down here, again, that would be a risk to successful completion and should cause alarm bells to start ringing. So let's now look at these 8 success factors, starting, of course, with number 1. Acceptance of the ETERN philosophy before starting work. This, of course, will include handling change dynamically and agreeing to deliver the right thing at the right time. And not to forget that by using the ETERN philosophy, it may be that you deliver less than 100% of the possible solution. Number 2, appropriate empowerment of the solution development team. Now, we'll learn that one of the roles within the solution development team is called the business ambassador. And the whole purpose of including such an individual within the team is so that decisions can be made quickly without slowing the progress of the product development. Of course, such business ambassador must be empowered appropriately in order to make such decisions without having to refer to higher authorities outside the team. In a similar way, the solution developers themselves, creating the products, must also be empowered to make, in this case, technical issues and problems and decisions. Not forgetting, of course, that depending on the nature of the project, there will be some level of tolerance within this approach. And if it looks like such tolerances are likely to be exceeded in terms of authority to make decisions, then these will be escalated, for example, initially to the project manager and then potentially onwards and upwards throughout the organization. Project success factor number 3. The commitment of senior business management to provide the necessary business ambassador and business advisor roles. These roles will provide the lowest level of detail and prioritization of any such requirements during the development time boxes. And senior management should take it upon themselves to ensure that the level of empowerment for these roles are appropriate for the particular project to ensure project success. Success factor number 4, incremental delivery. This has 2 positive benefits. The first, of course, is early release of benefits into the operational areas, as we discussed, and the other is reduction in risk. As you can well imagine, delivering incrementally is lower risk than one big bang approach, if you will, to the final solution. The way in which incremental delivery occurs is both within the solution development team, of course, but also at a business level. You can well imagine that a particular business area that is to receive incremental delivery of products within its operational sphere may need to retrain, prepare real estate, reorganize in some way or another. So incremental delivery is important from both the technical aspects and the business aspects. In fact, speak to any operational manager, and being given the project's products in smaller but more manageable chunks gives far less deployment risk than having the whole system delivered in one large delivery slice, if you will. Next up, success factor number 5, access by the solution development team to business roles. I think the key word here is co-location. It's absolutely vital wherever possible to ensure that the solution development team and the business roles that sit in the same area, whatever that might mean. In effect, they should have a dedicated environment and, as much as possible, free from interruptions. Indeed, it's one of the jobs of the project manager to ensure not only that communication within the team is optimized, but also that such interruptions do not get in the way of development team work. Number 6, solution development team skills. Although communication plays a key part here, what we're talking about is that each member of the team should have the right level of knowledge, skills and experience, both in terms of their business knowledge where necessary and appropriate technical expertise. Number 7, solution development team size. Clearly, a large team will have a large overhead and communication becomes more complex. A term actually suggests that a team size should consist of between 5 and 9 people. And when this occurs, communication can be done very successfully at an informal level with a minimum of management overhead. So that a team with a small size means that communications become more simple and that daily stand-ups, you'll recall I mentioned that, can normally be carried out much quicker. If you are faced with the prospect of a large solution development team, another approach is to split it into 2 or more groups, thus reducing the management and communication overhead of each team. And finally, number 8, a supportive commercial relationship. What we're talking about here is the customer-supplier relationship. Now clearly, if some of the products are being created under a contractual relationship using a third party, then care should be taken to ensure that such a relationship supports the agile principles of iterative and incremental development. Clearly, if the customer and supply side are within the same organization, then this becomes a lot simpler to manage. So that's the 8 success factors. Let's now look at some of the agile project management key risk areas. These are called management factors and they need constant monitoring as they are key risks to the project. Now as such, these key risks need to be managed by the project manager. Number 1, empowerment is two-way. It's one thing to tell people they're empowered, but another to make sure that this is constantly reinforced and that individuals or teams are constantly coaxed to make their own decisions. Indeed, some individuals, even though they're told they can make their own decisions because of the culture and their background, if you will, they may find that difficult. So it's important for the project manager to encourage them to make their own decisions. Acceptance of the philosophy, that's the Agile philosophy, within the organization. We've covered quite a few of the differences here between a traditional project and an Agile project. And again, maybe culturally, acceptance of the philosophy in the organization can be something that will take a little while. One of the bits of advice that the handbook gives is to consider piloting Agile using a small, lower risk project in order to gain acceptance of the philosophy within your organization. I've already mentioned that co-location is key to maximize communication, but if, however, it's not possible, consider a project focus room for the team, sometimes called a project war room, where the whole team can come together and meet up from time to time and to help improve communication and to foster the correct spirit for full empowerment. Next, large teams can be subdivided into smaller teams. I mentioned that just a few minutes ago. What would happen here is that the products would be split up and each given to one of the smaller teams. Representatives can have their own cross-team stand-ups to make sure that the teams communicate across each other as well as within each other. Business time, never compromise. I've highlighted how important it is that business representatives are given roles within the Agile project team. And if they're not prepared to support this, this puts the principals at risk. And if they're not committed, then why should you be? A very brave thing to say in a training course, but back in your organization, it is important that this should be escalated if there is seen to be any problem where appropriate representatives and the time they spend within the team is not happening. So let's just summarize the principles and success factors. Number one, the business should be represented within the team. Communication should be as informal as possible, and the team should be quality focused, checking as the products are created, ensuring that constant reviews occur. The project has a flexible scope. By using prioritization, flexing lower priorities is the way to keep the project on track. And of course, response to change should be done freely, openly, and encouraged. Collaborative teamwork, as we've just discussed. We've mentioned that in several of these bullets, referring to co-location, dividing into smaller teams, and giving appropriate user and business representatives, making sure that the whole team work in a collaborative fashion. An iterative approach to the development of the products and build incrementally, gradually coming together as the complete product itself. And again, using the iterative approach, test as you go, inspect and adapt what you're doing to make sure that you're on track to deliver the appropriate products. In effect, this last bullet is all about control. Okay, well now just finally, I've mentioned several times in this module and the previous one that Agile has several techniques. I'll be covering them in detail in later modules, but I'd just like to bring your attention to what exactly they are, just to set your expectations, if you will. The first I've mentioned once or twice, called facilitated workshops. This is where you bring together stakeholders in order to discuss the requirements of the project to help identify the potential solutions that will be delivered by the project. The use of facilitated workshops is many, and you'll find they'll be very useful throughout the whole of the project. Modeling. These are approaches to solution development using a lot of visualization and involving the business or customer as much as possible. There are various ways to perform models. You may be thinking right now of plastic models, paper models, and so on and so forth. If you've got a software background, you'll know about partially functioning code that can be used to demonstrate certain aspects of the complete solution. And using partially developed user interface drawings would be another way of using modeling. Prioritization using the Moscow technique. Here M stands for must have, S for should have, C for could have, and W for won't have this time, but may have later. And that prioritization is used throughout the project in order to reach a common understanding of the importance of each requirement. Indeed, we'll see how prioritization is absolutely vital at time box level to ensure that the time box finishes on time. Another technique is prototyping. This is where you're creating examples of the solution from different perspectives in order to converge on an accurate solution. Now, it may be helpful at this point just to discuss the difference between modelling and prototyping. A model is typically used to visualize something which actually doesn't yet exist. And it could be, as I've discussed already, such aspects such as drawings, diagrams, screenshots. Partially working software would be an example. Prototyping, very similar, where this will be a partially working product with possibly some form of reduced functionality. So you can see that both modelling and prototyping can be used at various different phases of the project. Time boxing. Controlling the project by breaking the project down into time boxes which each have a clear set of objectives and deliverables. Deliverables, of course, being the products. So time boxes are a well-defined process used to control the creation of low-level products in an iterative fashion. Don't worry, we'll be covering that in a separate module later on. Good. Well, that brings us nicely to the end of Module 2. Thank you again for your company. And in the next module, we'll be looking at the Agile life cycle itself. So thank you for your time and attention, and we'll meet again in Module 3.